You're listening to the Blues and Arts Hour on 103.9 WYAB, brought to you by Blue Cross Blue Shield of Mississippi and Small Town Music. The lines were long and the people were grumpy. Some of them blew their horns, but that made no difference. The lines were going to move at turtle speed because of the sheer numbers of people competing for the gas. You may remember that scene at gas station after gas station here in the central part of the state, right after Hurricane Katrina, 20 years ago on August 29th. That was the day she made landfall. Or maybe what you remember is the heat. The intense tropical wall of water that was the oppressive atmosphere as she moved north, bringing hurricane-force winds even this far north, damaging buildings, some of them severely, ripping off roofs with relentless force, with the rage of a dying devil who seemed to know that the landfall had mortally wounded her, but who both didn't want to give up and at the same time wanted to take as many buildings and people with her as she could. Or maybe you remember sitting stagnant for days, power lines down, houses and businesses darkened, families unable to communicate with one another. The sounds of tree limbs snapping in the wind, replacing the now much longed-for mundane noises of the TV or the hum of the refrigerator. And while all of these types of memories pervaded the consciousness of the people who lived north of the coast, it was the damage and death that will live on in the memory of the collective soul of South Mississippi. And it was those scenes that were captured on film by today's guest, Melody Golding. Her photographs can now be seen at the two Mississippi museums. Hurricane Katrina, Mississippi Remembers, photographs by Melody Golding. What was it that inspired you to go to the coast? Because a lot of people who are listening may remember, or they may be too young to have experienced this. So what was it that motivated you and your trip?
Well, there is no question that the first thing that motivated me about going to the coast and documenting what happened is my son became a volunteer overnight for the American Red Cross here in Vicksburg, where I'm from. And he just kept telling us about everything that was going on up there. And I thought, I've got to help too. And so we started gathering things that we could take. And then I thought, I can do more. I want to do more to help. So much of the focus was on New Orleans after Hurricane Katrina came ashore and the levee broke. And it just seemed like Mississippi was being left out in the news, in my opinion. And I thought, I can go down there and I can at least take my camera and I can document what happened. And so that's what I did.
How soon after the landfall did you make it down?
I went down on day 8 after the hurricane came ashore. So it was still pretty rough. Then, roads were impassable. Because my son John Reed was a volunteer for the Red Cross. My oldest son was at Mississippi State, but I was inspired to go to the Red Cross, and I said, I'm going to the coast. My sister-in-law had evacuated to our home in Vicksburg from Ocean Springs, and I was going to take her back home. And I thought, well, if I'm going to the coast, I'm going to take water, MREs, baby supplies, whatever is needed. I just took all of the seats out of my car and packed it full of all kinds of things that people may need. And I threw my cameras in at the last minute. And that was, I went on day 8, and I continued going down to the coast for a year.
So we've got a lot to get to with the camera angle. No pun intended there. But I do want to ask you, when you got down there, probably that initial load of supplies ran out pretty quickly, didn't it?
It did. I remember asking the Red Cross people here in Vicksburg, who do I give it to? And they said, you'll know when you get there. And I just started handing out food and water. And the crazy thing that was really touching, wasn't really crazy, it was very touching, was, I would be handing people food, MREs and water, and they would hand it back to me and they said, well, you look hot and thirsty, you should have a water too. And I'm like, oh no, this is for you. But the spirit of giving and coming together and recovery was just heartrending.
What was the first stark thing that you saw when you got there and started volunteering?
It looked to me like a nuclear bomb had gone off. It reminded me of the pictures of Hiroshima after World War II, when World War II ended, and it was just gone. The Mississippi Gulf Coast was just gone. It was hard for me to imagine that anyone could have survived the impact of that storm and living through it, but they did. But it was, what struck me first was it was just gone.
So it was as if something that had been there before had completely vanished.
Completely vanished. And after my first trip to the coast, I realized that I had to continue to document what happened on the coast because, again, so much of the focus was on New Orleans and nothing was being said on the national news about Mississippi. And I thought, the only way that I can help is to tell the story of what happened. And every time I went, I thought, I've got to come back. And I ended up, like I said, going back for every week for a year. I'd sleep on the beach, I'd sleep in my car. But I just wanted to tell the story.
Were there other people doing that too? Were there other people who were going down there? Did you see other people who were sleeping on the beach and doing the same thing that you were doing?
There were so many people there going down to help, and people were in tents on the beach. Not so much photographing like I was. Of course, there were the news, people that worked for the news agencies. They were down there. I didn't really see too many of them, but I was just kind of on my own. I was in my car and I was on my own, and I didn't stage anything that I photographed. I just took pictures of images as I saw them. And there were a lot of church groups, a lot of people down there helping the recovery effort, but as far as people photographing, no, I did not really see anybody.
Did you use digital, or was this primarily a film effort?
No, all of my work concerning Hurricane Katrina is medium format film. I packed all my film. I just grabbed all the film that I had and put it in coolers, and had my dark bag so I could change my film and the light. And it was, I had 5 medium format cameras, and I kept them loaded at all times. And so it was a tremendous amount of work. I remember I would, the things that I saw, it was very emotional. It was a very emotional project. I remember my hands shaking, trying to load the film in my cameras, and it was not easy. Like now I could take my cell phone and take 1,000 images in a minute. But to take the thousands of images that I took about Hurricane Katrina took me a year. I mean, it was just a tremendous amount of work and effort compared to what photography is today.
Yeah, for people who have never actually put their hands on a film camera and taken a film photograph, the expense is one factor, but also just knowing that you have a limited supply there in the camera also could potentially inspire what you do with setting up the photograph and framing and that kind of thing.
Yes, I mean it's a real effort using film. It's a terrific effort using medium format film. Then you have to get the film developed, and then when I had the film developed, I had it digitized. So of course, it's not the resolution that it would be now because this was 20 years ago. But at the time, I was kind of a little ahead of the game as far as getting it digitized, so I could send my images through emails and whatnot. So it was a process. It was not easy.
Coming up, the inspiration for documenting something that changed Mississippi forever. You're listening to the Blues and Arts Hour on 103.9 WYAB. You're listening to the Blues and Arts Hour on 103.9 WYAB. Brought to you by Blue Cross Blue Shield of Mississippi and Small Town Music. August 26th, 2005.
Based on the projected intensity and the track of the storm right now and the conditions in the Gulf, it is expected to make landfall around midday or 1 p.m. on Monday. Coastal counties could start seeing tropical force winds as early as 3 a.m. Monday.
Across the Mississippi coast to Alabama and into Florida, millions of lives were changed in a day by a cruel and wasteful storm. In the aftermath, we have seen fellow citizens left stunned and uprooted, searching for loved ones and grieving for the dead, and looking for meaning in a tragedy that seems so blind and random. We've also witnessed the kind of desperation no citizen of this great and generous nation should ever have to know. Fellow Americans calling out for food and water. Vulnerable people left at the mercy of criminals who had no mercy. And the bodies of the dead lying uncovered and untended in the street. These days of sorrow and outrage have also been marked by acts of courage and kindness that make all Americans proud.
Where there's a terrible story, a terrible outcome, terrible behavior, that gets all the news coverage. And in Mississippi, you didn't have that. We bore the brunt of the worst natural disaster in American history. Our people got knocked down flat. It was utter obliteration. Yet those strong, resilient, self-reliant people got right back up and hitched up their britches and went to work. Not just helping themselves, but helping their neighbors. That's a story you didn't hear told enough.
Today, you are spending some time with Melody Golding, author, artist, and photographer, and the person who took the pictures featured in a new exhibit at the two Mississippi museums called Hurricane Katrina Remembered, Photographs by Melody Golding. Golding drove from her home in Vicksburg to the coast for the first time 8 days after Hurricane Katrina made landfall, devastating New Orleans, but wreaking its worst damage on the Mississippi coast. Golding took her cameras and began taking one picture after the other as she worked with other volunteers to hand out water, ready-to-eat meals, and other supplies. And 20 years later, those pictures are some of the best available documentation, not only of the devastation on the coast, but also of the people of Mississippi as they came together to help neighbors pick up what was left and start over.
For me, photography it's a visual communication. We all know that. Everybody has a phone now. But for me, it's an adventure, absolutely fueled by relentless challenge, particularly when you're using film. And, you know, when the photography and the adventure become one, the experience becomes exponential. And I think that the film images really portray what happened on the coast after Hurricane Katrina. And then, you know, it was the devastation, the recovery, and you know, now the coast is back. So it's a story with a good ending.
Let's talk about some of the favorite photos that you took. I don't know if that's a good word to use here because we're talking about subject matter that is, well, like you say, devastating. But what were some of the photographs that you took that stand out to you?
Well, I guess favorite would be an adequate word to use. I do have favorites. I have one image that's in the museum, the two museums for the Katrina exhibit that's there now. And, you know, it says on a sign in front of a house, it says, "Do not let Katrina steal your joy." I think that was in front of Beauvoir, but it was, you know, you can't, you know, when there's, for individuals who survived the storm and through those tragic early days, it just became the truest test of the human spirit. And to have what it takes to absorb the hardest blows in life and then to respond with a positive statement like "Don't let Katrina kill your joy," those really spoke to me because, you know, I still had my home. My life was put together. I could go home after I'd been to the coast. These people, everything they had was gone. Just gone. And you just can't quell the human spirit. And when they all came together, it really just spoke volumes to me. Some of my photography, like another one of my favorites, is a tricycle that's against an iron fence, and it's some child's tricycle, you know, humanity. It just showed that it was just gone. But there was beauty. There was a strange beauty and poetic quality in the image of a tricycle that was left. And, just things like that. I guess it's how you look at it. It's in the eye of the beholder.
I'm a town outside of Ocean Springs. Most people never heard of me. A picture of serenity till now. Burlington is my name. You heard it on the nation's news. Hurricane did her abuse. And now my train tracks are all twisted and my houses have been lifted and security was shifted by the storm. And I still love the Mississippi breeze blowing through my bended trees, bowing down as if to breathe a prayer. An old man stands beside his house, nothing but foundation now, but a U.S. flag is draped upon his stairs. And he cries, one nation under God, bring back Burlington, Burlington, save Burlington. She trampled on my dirty shore, recklessly knocked down my doors, screaming, do not take your life for granted. She ripped apart my wooden floors where children played the night before. Now in its place a sign reads, we'll be back. My pictures have all blown away. My seagulls have all flown away. The priceless things I owned are petting now. But I still love the Mississippi breeze blowing through my bended trees, bowing down as if to breathe a prayer. An old man stands beside his house, nothing but foundation now, but a U.S. flag is draped upon his stairs. And he cries, one nation under God, please bring back Burlington, Burlington, Burlington. 'Cause the storm, she cleansed us with her rain. We've lost, but we have much to gain. My people persevere right through the pain. Hear the angels whispering my name. Burlington, no one's to blame. God will slowly wash away this stain. 'Cause we are one nation under God. He'll bring back Burlington, Burlington, save Burlington. God bless Burlington.
To see it, and frankly, you had to see it in person to get it, to capture the scale of the destruction, the type of the destruction. You just couldn't get that out of a television camera or a photograph in a newspaper. You had to see it.
Coming up, if you couldn't see it in person, photographs would have to do. And you'll find out how people first saw those pictures on the Blues and Arts Hour on 103.9 WYAB. You're listening to the Blues and Arts Hour on 103.9 WYAB, brought to you by Blue Cross Blue Shield of Mississippi and Small Town Music. August 29th is the 20th anniversary of Hurricane Katrina making landfall just west of the Mississippi-Louisiana state line. When that happened, the Mississippi coast took the brunt of the hurricane's winds and flood surge. When she came ashore, the storm had sustained winds of more than 120 miles per hour. 238 people died in Mississippi along the coast and even inland. The storm maintained hurricane strength as far as Meridian. Melody Golding, author, artist, and photographer, began making trips to the coast 8 days after the storm, volunteering and at the same time taking pictures that are now featured in a 20th anniversary exhibit at the two Mississippi museums. Photojournalism is not what I would call a lost art at this point, but it's something that a lot of people maybe don't grasp the effectiveness of, as newspapers have kind of waned as a main medium of getting news. So how is it that you take a story and transfer it to the image? How do you do that?
Well, for me, I was not working for anyone except myself. You know, I did this very independently, so I didn't have any kind of judgment looming over me. You know, I went as an artist, as a photographer to capture what happened. And, you know, photography can capture moments of jubilation or extreme despair. And I feel like my photography in this body of work represents that. You know, the human experience is vast and complicated, and it's an adventure. And, you know, the photography becomes an essential part of historical preservation. We know that from the earliest days of photography. And I was very inspired by the photographers from the early days, like Matthew Brady in the Civil War. And, you know, my quest as a photographer was to tell the story of what happened. And it's really in its purest form because I was only working for myself. I wasn't working for any news agency or the government or anyone else. I just did it because I wanted to tell the story on my own.
You mentioned you weren't working for anybody. How did your photographs come to be published, or were they published at the time?
Well, I'm so glad that you asked that question because I had been working with the University Press of Mississippi, and I took the photographs that I had, some of the photographs that I had at the time, and I met with the editor-in-chief there, and I said, you know, I think I have a story to tell. Would you be interested in this? And they did, and they published my book, Katrina, Mississippi Women Remembers, and all of the royalties go back to people on the coast who had been impacted by the storm.
Did you, at the time when you were going down there for a year, did you get any photographs of some of the rescue? Well, I shouldn't say rescue at that point, but some of the cleanup efforts. A lot of the people who came to help, maybe even some of the charity benefits, things like that.
Oh, absolutely. In the exhibit at the two museums, you can clearly see that because it's the devastation and then the recovery and then the resilience. And you can see that in the book, too. The book and the exhibit really represent a one-year chronicle after Hurricane Katrina hit. And it really tells a story. It really tells a story of what happened. And I hope that this record of this difficult time in the history of our state serves a higher purpose to mold and shape the future of all of us, as well as those who follow along in years to come. And we think about these other disasters that have happened in the United States since. And I feel like after Hurricane Katrina, it was really an inspiration to others on how to respond in the face of a disaster such as this.
Yeah, 2000.
You know, there's good and bad. There's good and bad. There were plenty of people who weren't doing the right thing, but I feel like more people were doing the right thing, and it showed the goodness of humans in the face of travesty.
2005 was relatively modern. It wasn't, it wasn't 1950. It wasn't 1960. This is something that, now in 2025, we can very well relate to the technology, to the way things were in 2005. And we say to ourselves now, if something like this happened, what would the devastation be like? But your photographs may answer that question, because there was no technology, no human construct that stood up well to what nature, that act of God, brought to the Mississippi coast.
I agree with you 100%. And, the thing about photography, it captures events in a unique manner in which words really cannot. Reading about an event is different from seeing it in a picture or witnessing it firsthand. And the photography really becomes a valuable historical documentation. And because it's medium format film, the Smithsonian Institution National Museum of American History Archive Center took it in their permanent collection and it's the only thing that they have about Hurricane Katrina actually from Mississippi. So it's a huge honor to be there, but that's how important they felt like the work was. Film can stand the test of time. Digital, maybe not so much. We don't know. The future will only tell, but you can always return to a negative and get a reproduction of a photograph from it. Digital, you may not have the technology in 20 or 30 years to share those images. We just don't know. It's kind of like a beta tape. You can have beta tapes in your house, but you can't play them.
Yeah.
So, that was the importance that the Smithsonian felt like with this body of work, was the medium format film.
How did this agreement between you and the Mississippi Museums come to be?
Well, they, one of their representatives there on the exhibits committee contacted me and didn't know me. She said we were trying to find an exhibit to commemorate the 20th anniversary, and we came across your work, and we wanted to know if you would be interested in having your work shown for the 20th anniversary in 2025. And I said, absolutely, it would be an honor. And they have been an absolute joy to work with. Those people are so professional. I mean, from all the way across the board, it has been nothing but a wonderful experience for me to be able to work with them. And it's just a huge honor for me to be there to tell this story on our state. I can't thank them enough for believing in me and my work.
Well, I know that a lot of artists maybe don't like to make themselves part of the story, or don't like to talk about this kind of thing, but have you been able to actually go to the museum and see people enjoying the exhibit?
I have, and, everybody's take is different. I have a video that I took from Burlington to Pascagoula. That was, my son went with me on several trips, and either, he drove and I would have my camera out the window, so I have a video in the exhibit as well. So it's a video experience of what I saw completely after the storm and the recovery. And it has a very sad music to it, and it's very moving. A lot of people leave crying. But now I feel like, because the coast has come back, it's very moving and it's heart-wrenching and it's difficult to look at, but it's a very important part of Mississippi's history. It's like I said before, Mississippi, after Hurricane Katrina, found itself once again the crucible of history. We had another gigantic, catastrophic event, and I just felt like it was my honor to be a part of the telling of it.
Coming up, the personal impact of seeing all the destruction up close. You've got the Blues and Arts Hour on 103.9 WYAB. You've got the Blues and Arts Hour on 103.9 WYAB. Brought to you by Blue Cross Blue Shield of Mississippi and Small Town Music.
It was utter obliteration on the coast. And it wasn't just a coastal calamity. A third of the fatalities happened inland, in the inland counties of the state. We had hurricane force winds north of Meridian. Oktibbeha and Lowndes counties, Columbus and Starkville, were declared major disaster areas because of the amount of destruction in those counties, more than 200 miles inland.
Former Mississippi Governor Haley Barbour speaking 10 years ago about his book in which he tells the story of some of his experiences with Hurricane Katrina.
The story that not everybody got to see, and virtually nobody got to see enough, because it simply wasn't covered very much. It's a story of strong, resilient, self-reliant people who had the misfortune, whatever you want to call it, to bear the brunt of the worst natural disaster in American history. And Katrina was the worst natural disaster in American history. It's the greatest insurance loss. It was the third deadliest natural disaster in American history. And it barreled right into us. And all of us who grew up around the Gulf South know when a hurricane comes up out of the Gulf from north to south, the worst place to be is in the northeast quadrant, the upper right hand. It's like a boxer's right cross. And of course, Katrina came on shore almost on the Louisiana-Mississippi line, which of course is the Pearl River. And where Mississippi and Louisiana make virtually a 90-degree angle. And it came and pushed all this water that it had been pushing in front of it for days, pushed it all into that corner with 150, 160 mile-an-hour winds. So that while Camille's winds were 200 miles an hour, spawned probably 200 hurricanes. And we thought Camille would be the worst. That's as bad as a hurricane could be. One of only 3 Category 5 hurricanes to ever come on shore in the United States. And we planned for Katrina, thinking it was the gold standard. Couldn't get worse than Katrina. Camille. It couldn't get worse than Camille. Well, Katrina was much worse than Camille. As I say, the winds weren't as high, but that wasn't the problem. It was the storm surge. The storm surge was the greatest storm surge ever recorded in the history of meteorology, according to the National Weather Service.
Now, on the 20th anniversary of the storm, the 2 Mississippi museums are featuring the photographs of Vicksburg author and artist Melody Golding, taken over a year's time.
That was one thing about my Katrina project. It's all black and white. I felt like to add color would add confusion to the chaos of the content of the picture. And so that was, kind of thought out on my part. I wanted it to be black and white. I didn't want it to be color.
Yeah, did you post?
Whereas
did you do it post production? Did you grayscale them afterward? Were they originally in color?
My mentor said always shoot in color. He said always shoot in color because that way you can always have color if you want it, but you can always print it in black and white also.
Yeah.
So, but at the time, when I decided to go to the coast, I didn't have the time to go on a shopping spree for film. I just had to take what I had. And so what I took to the coast was color and black and white. But for the book and for the exhibits, I wanted it to be presented in black and white.
Something that I remember as a kid is hearing about Hurricane Camille. And I heard about it a lot because it was one of those events that shaped the history of the state politically, physically, and Katrina comes along, not in the grand scheme of things, not too long after that, and does the same thing all over again. It reshapes Mississippi. How has it reshaped you as a person after going down there and doing this for a year?
Well, I can tell you, it took its toll on me. This was not an easy project, and it was not a happy project. It was, I'm normally a pretty upbeat person, but this took a lot of fortuitousness to be able to not only go down there once, but to continue going down there for a year. It was very hard. I can probably honestly say that when the museum first contacted me about having the exhibit there, I had a moment of PTSD. I thought, not again. But I kind of pulled it together, and I knew what an honor it was to be able to exhibit at the two museums. And I just really appreciate them honoring me and having my work there. It's a human story. Everybody has a human story. It's a testament to the universal themes of struggle and hope and recovery. And I just knew that the indomitable strength, spirit, and courage of the people of Mississippi would shine through, and it did. And it did. I think that Mississippi is an inspiration to others on how to survive a catastrophe that is beyond our control.
And how to recover quite well after just 2 decades.
Exactly. The resilience of the human spirit was the one thing that Katrina simply just could not wash away from the people in Mississippi. And it didn't matter that their story wasn't being told on a national level, at least in my opinion. The people didn't wait for the cameras to come. They picked up right away and helped not only themselves, but others. And I think it was a inspiration for all the church groups that came. I don't know how the coast would have recovered without all the church groups that came. I really appreciate the university press believing in my work to help tell this story. And it's not an easy story, but it's easier now that it has a good outcome. But I hope that people do take an opportunity to go see the exhibit while it's at the two museums. It's free. And the museums have just been, again, I'll reiterate, they just have been wonderful to work with. They're so professional.
You are not only a photographer, but also an artist and an author. Where can people find your work?
You can go to my website, melodygolding.com, www.melodygolding.com. I have 4 books out, all published by the University Press of Mississippi. And you can look at my books on Amazon or at your local bookstores. They have copies of my books as well. But it's funny because my Katrina book, the royalties from that book all go back to the coast. Panther Track went back to the Delta. My book about pilots on the Mississippi River goes to the Seamen's Church Institute. And I have a new book that will be released in September called Hometown Mississippi, and the royalties from the sale of that book go to Jacob's Ladder in Vicksburg, which promotes education for challenged adults. So you can find it on my website, Amazon.com, local bookstores. I'm out there. You can find me.
How do you make money? I mean, my gosh, you got money, feeding all these other organizations.
Well, I'm very, very fortunate. I've been very blessed. God's been good to me, and this is my way of putting back. I'm no good with the hammer and nails. I knew I couldn't do that on the coast. I love being able to use my gift, which I feel like is God-given, to put back and to tell people stories. And I feel like everyone has a story, everyone, if you just take the time to listen. And it's just an honor for me to be able to tell the stories that people have to share. It's just a gift that God's given me, and it's my way of giving back.
Well, I'm going to thank you for your work and for you taking the time to talk to us.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it. I enjoyed this time. Thank you.
The Blues and Arts Hour every Friday morning at 9 right here on 103.9 WYAB.